As a coach, how will you prepare to face Arsenal next season? That is the unanswerable question that Mikel Arteta is trying to keep unanswered this pre-season. Two differing halves in a 1-1 draw against Nuremberg, a cruise control 5-0 victory against the MLS All-Stars, maybe unsurprising 2-0 loss at the hands of Manchester United, and then a chaotic but really impressive at the same time performance in a 5-3 victory against Barcelona. A mixed bag to say the least. Nonetheless, as we are in pre-season, I prefer to look at patterns as opposed to results. And the former points to Mikel Arteta's experimentation and efforts to create a squad characterised by a fluid rigidity. What do I mean? Well, although Arteta's shape stays the same, the rotations of the players within it are abundant. And this comes as a part of Arteta trying to make Arsenal as unpredictable as possible next season, make them a comfortable side in uncomfortable situations. And in today's video, I will explain the reasoning for the tweaks, for the experiments, for the structures that have characterised Arsenal's pre-season. Last season, Arteta evolved Arsenal into a real tactically refined football side, but he is looking to take things one step further. Which fullback will invert into midfield? How many? Which 8 will drop deeper? How can we tweak our 4-3-3 that transitions into a 3-2-5 shape? Unsettled possession. Can we go long over an aggressive man-marking press now? So with all this to come, let's embark on Arteta's attempts to make us impossible to prepare for, and why we shouldn't have expected, I think, flawless performances every game this pre-season anyway. So, we're going to start with inverted fullbacks. Last season, Alexander Zinchenko inverted from left-back into midfield, alongside normally Thomas Partey in the pivot. The Ukrainian played a fundamental role in Arsenal's build-up, whether that was deep possession right until the final third, and he became integral to Arteta's attempts to gain control with his press resistance, timelessness on the ball, progressive capabilities. But the final 2 games of the season, things changed. Zinchenko's injury saw Arteta flip these dynamics to where Thomas Partey inverted from right-back into midfield. It was evident Arteta wanted Arsenal to be adaptable game by game, overloading whichever side he sees fit. However appealing, though, this symmetry was, the Spaniard clearly wanted more. Bring on pre-season, where Jakub Kiwior against Nurnberg and the MLS All-Stars inverted from left-back into midfield. On paper, very surprising. Although technically gifted, no doubt, the Pole's frame doesn't lend itself to that natural agility or press resistance to manipulate the ball against a press, and at times he looked uncomfortable when receiving towards our own goal. However, this is not what we should focus on. Although Kiwior will not start in games against more technical or physical sides necessarily, where control is harder to gain or maintain, his suitability inverting against lower blocks gives Arsenal the option for something new. We are suddenly not so reliant on Zinchenko alone to invert from the left. I think Kiwior's ability to play left centre-back as well in our back 3 axis in possession means we can also invert someone from the right whilst Kiwior is on the pitch. It's not Zinchenko or bust. And this is where Jurrien Timber comes into things. If you've seen my video already on the Dutchman, which predicts his sort of right-back inversion into midfield, hopefully you're just as excited as I am. Subsequently, I'd say Arteta can now potentially line up with a combination of one of Zinchenko or Kiwior and one of Timber or Partey, and probably all 4 at the same time if he wants, allowing us to flip inverting from left to right mid-game instead of solely game by game or substitution by substitution. But against Barcelona, Timber actually played as a left-back, and although he didn't actually invert, and this was probably because Arteta was sort of limiting the burden on him without playing, left-back is a position Timber hasn't actually played before, especially considering he's mainly been side to invert from the right. This lack of inverted fullback, either side, probably made the game more chaotic, but as I will get onto later, and have already spoken on at length, Arsenal had so many positives to take away from that Barcelona game. Suddenly, how does an opposition deal with, in terms of their pressing, deal with the overloads of a team that can suddenly switch from side to side. Their ball side fullback must now be cautious pressing our own, as they could suddenly find their man inverted and an overload on the opposite flank. Then there is the question of how do you deal with such adept, technical inverted fullbacks? These team dynamics, they take time to bed in. So many new possible solutions. And they are ones that we need to let cohere. But they're not the only ones, in fact. But returning quickly to the lack of inverted fullbacks against Barcelona, this is not something that we'll see regularly deployed, but it resulted in a change of system to sort of more a 2-3-5, where Partey was in the lone six, Timber and White on sort of a horizontal axis alongside him. A full in-depth analysis of the Barcelona game is also live on the channel. But with Timber at left back here, someone who excels in the 1v1 duel, allows us to cope, if not flourish, but cope when we cannot keep a fullback inverted the whole time. When we're in those chaotic moments in transitional games, we now have the fullbacks to remain defending in that 4-3-3 shape or 4-2-4, whilst also giving us that technical assurance in possession. And this was always this defensive capability against technical assurance, was always the playoff between Zinchenko, who was so good for us, and Kieran Tierney. But now let's move on to the next side of the unpredictability of Arsenal and the fluid rigidity, and that's the deep lying number 8 position. As aforementioned, our left-hand-sided number 8 last season, Granit Xhaka, was at times forced to retreat in the initial build-up against difficult opposition when, inevitably, the fullback, and that was Zinchenko, couldn't always stay inverted, and the Swiss was vital in wrestling back control. Someone able to make a number of passes in the first and second phases. You may see where I'm going here. Almost all top teams deploy this all-phase central midfielder, typically on the left. For City, it was Gundogan. For Barcelona, Pedri, De Jong, etc. Mason Mount has been bought to try and play that role for Ten Hag at Manchester United. But throughout the first 4 pre-season games for Arsenal, the players deployed as a left interior, Kai Havertz, Leandro Trossard, also Emil Smith-Rowe at times, are all ultimately offensive solutions, but all offer different options in the role. We'll start with Havertz as a left interior. The German has a much higher set point to Xhaka, positioning himself almost instantly high in between the lines, and he's not the type of player we know to drift deep and get touches on the ball. And it's been quite frustrating when people have seen him as the solution to the left 8 role, when he plays as a left interior, he's far too advanced to be a typical left 8. Whether Havertz plays here, which is, as we go along, probably only more likely against, maybe more likely against weaker opposition, or sort of a left 10 or a shadow striker, or even a centre forward, we will begin to see probably why he's even more than this preseason, why he's been bought for Arsenal. He's at his best when he's allowed to attack the box from deep, play between the lines, create and move into space. And I'm returning to that Ram Deuter type free role that we saw him in against the MLS All-Stars in that second half, alongside a tweak to our system. Instead of the left-hand-sided 8 dropping deeper, it was Ødegaard this time, and Havertz was encouraged to drift into central areas and even the right-hand-sided half space, beyond our sort of mobile strike force. And this formed a sort of lopsided box shape, with Rice naturally higher than Timber in the pivot. And this was not a diamond by any stretch of the imagination, because Rice was still deep lying, and we often formed a box in settled possession. But if we are to see Havertz continue in this role, which I'm sure he's not going to play all the time, Ødegaard being able to drop deeper gives us that option of, again, changing dynamics and playing a more aggressive left-hand-sided interior solution. And this makes things particularly difficult for opposition presses and their defensive blocks. Ødegaard certainly has this deeper all-phase role within him, but for the large part, I probably expect us to stay with the deeper set point, or at least the same sort of axis set point for both interiors, or on the left-hand side, slightly deeper. But Arteta is making the players comfortable playing the same system with fluid individual roles, hence the term fluid rigidity. But we've also seen Leandro Trossard in the left interior, and even though, again, offensive solution, he's much more like an 8 when he plays there. Again, not typically an abundant passer. I still maintain that we, at least need to add someone into the squad in that all-phase midfield role. But this guy, Trossard, is a genuine solution here. He's terrific, and I'll explain here why. Going to his recent performance against Barcelona, he often started from the left wing, but drifted into a central pivot with Thomas Partey in the lone 6 in our 4-2-4 shape in build-up. And this is another build-up shape that will make us more and more unpredictable, using it in tandem with the 4-3 axis, like we did last season. And at times with Barca, we started in this 4-3 shape with 2 higher 10s, but Partey in the 6 does need help at times, and this player was Trossard. But to quickly, before we continue, to describe the 4-2-4 build-up shape, it's choosing where to overload. Here we keep players occupying the opposition backline, now sort of unsure if their fullbacks want to promote and push up the pitch. Also, the 4-2-4 shapes give high and wide wingers and fullbacks, whilst at the same time sort of short distances between the players in midfield, and always the option of someone drifting into the half spaces. And it's really important, I think, to mix up the idea of build-up, so you can't be man-marked out of it. For example, Arsenal expected Man City to use a typical 4-2-4 shape, this 4-2 axis at the Etihad last season. City switched to a 4-3 and totally overloaded us in the build-up, and that was a large reason why Arteta's side got dominated at the Etihad. But back to Trossard drifting into this pivot. Havertz, sort of the natural Ramdeuter at heart, moves into the vacated space that Trossard has left, and this fluid transition is very hard to pick up for opposition defences. And sort of add Jesus to this, often finding himself wide, even Havertz in the centre forward, makes our fluid left-hand side, maybe even more so than last season. And again, this fluid rigidity, the same system with fluid roles for players, at odds to Pep, who is just as rigid in terms of structure, but is also very rigid in terms of the players occupying certain roles. And there isn't a right way to do things, but I think this fluid rigidity is certainly something that helps the profiles in Arteta's squad much more. We've seen Trossard and Havertz in that right-hand sided 10 at points. I mean, for Trossard's second goal against Barca, he was the centre forward, Saka was the left interior, Jesus was on the wide right, Vieira in that right 10, and smith-rowe in the left wing. But what makes Trossard even better as sort of this number 8, whether he plays and drifts central, coexisting with Havertz, or starting out and out from the off in the 8, is that he's so much more press resistant to someone like Kai Havertz, he is able to drift deeper to get touches on the ball. And again, he's not that abundant passer of sort of like a second phase midfielder, but his turning circle is top class. He has that manipulative dribbling in tight spaces, and then utilising this in the higher area, he also has the ball striking to create and score. His rotations make box invading simple, and his ambidextrousness is also useful. And despite his physical lack at times, he flies into duels and is powerful holding the ball up. He still has to improve positionally, defensively, but he is a great option here. I think he still has legs to develop, but I think it depends whether Mikel wants to buy someone or continue to find internal solutions. Importantly, Trossard certainly has that profile to be coached into that 8 who can drift deeper. But Arsenal certainly require someone to be able to do that role, like I said, to control games better, because Barcelona was a top performance, and Partey went a long way in the 6 to helping control this. But either an inverted fullback or any abundant passer in the central areas, whether that is an 8, against the sides like Barcelona or Manchester United, or even obviously Man City, will help us control these games and make them less transition based. And just a side note, we can translate players sort of interchanging roles to Gabriel's experiment as a central centre back against United. He doesn't have that presence of a Saliba commanding the back line, running back on goal, disguising a pass, bursting past players. But it comes back to Arteta trying to figure out solutions for mid-game scenarios, sort of those quick fixes in crucial moments, because fine margins really do matter. Lastly, we're going to focus on how Arsenal now may have the ability to get out. Brighton at home, Man City away. Ring any bells? Well, these are two examples of sides that man-marked Arsenal off the park, making it extremely difficult for us to get out in that build-up. And often this means, when this happens to teams, they will opt to go long. And as the coaching level continues to be enhanced in the Premier League, managers have had to find a solution, an effective one, at playing direct at times. Haaland, Gakpo, Evan Ferguson, Ivan Toney, United's targets, Højlund, are all physical centre forwards able to win duels, running behind, and to a basic standard retain the ball to secure play instantly in higher areas. And Arsenal have just signed a 6'4" German. And irrespective of where sort of Havertz starts games for us, Arteta has and will continue to use him as an outball. And we already have the dynamic runners off him. And this direct option makes Arsenal even more a pain for managers to set up against if we can become effective in going over an aggressive press. So that's the goal then. And although results this preseason have been slightly disappointing at times, and I expect sort of as we get closer to the season, the experimentation to slowly peter out, Arteta is trying to prevent Arsenal from becoming stuck. I'll go back to it. I vividly remember that sort of fretful day in Manchester last April as Pep suddenly changed his build-up dynamics, left us sort of bamboozled. And how does a coach prepare for Arsenal? Arteta is barking up the same tree. But yeah, how does a coach prepare? That's for their brains to answer, not mine. I'd say Arsenal definitely have the foundations laid, so don't fret, Arsenal fans. But I am very intrigued to see how Mikel continues to go about sort of the tweaks he's making and trialing for the rest of pre-season. Got Monaco coming up in the Emirates Cup, also Man City in the Community Shield, and there definitely is an argument for wanting the squad, to be totally set for the new season. But this video is just to communicate the sort of reasoning behind all this experimentation and why the thinking behind it is very, very exciting, and why hopefully that will elevate Arsenal to another level. So just a quick video sort of summing up pre-season and what we can take away from it so far. Sort of recapping what I've said in previous ones, but just a quick one that I wanted to get out and sort of clear up the idea of fluid rigidity and this unpredictability that Arteta is trying to create. This may be the final sort of Arsenal game or Arsenal sort of video that I cover for a while. I've got so many unedited videos on other sides that I'm going to start getting out now. But whatever video comes next, I'm very glad you're enjoying them. Like, comment, subscribe, share, do all that nice stuff. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.